Scripture says in Romans chapter 5, verse 8, it says, God demonstrated his own love toward us. You know, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. To save
provided a Savior. I ask that as we continue with our sermon and the rest of our service, Lord, that you would make us keenly aware of what you've done for us. And Lord, what you're calling us to do for you and others. Your words of my mouth and your meditations of my heart. Give glory and honor to you alone. Amen. This week we are starting a new series on the parables, specifically the parables found in the Gospel of Matthew. We're calling it, well, Pictures of the Kingdom. And I hope that it's a series you're going to enjoy as we dive in headlong together over the next several weeks. This particular subject is a hard one, the parables. All these stories that we're going to be looking about, friends, keep in mind, are essentially about the same thing. They are about the kingdom of heaven, as Matthew, the gospel writer, calls it. And you need to understand, when we talk about the kingdom of heaven, we're talking about more than just that place with streets of gold where God's people will go one day. We're talking about the reign of God and eternity, and here with us now. So for the next several weeks, we'll be examining the kingdom. I heard a preacher say one time that a parable is like a big ball of yarn with one little strand protruding. Get a hold of that strand, and you can unravel the whole ball. My prayer for us is that we can grab a hold of that strand of truth and begin to unravel the truth of the gospel through these simple stories. Today we are talking about the pearl and the hidden treasure. And I invite you to follow along with me as I read our gospel text today. It comes from Matthew 13, verses 44 through 46. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought the field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. Thanks be to God for the reading, the understanding of His holy, blessed word. Have you ever wondered why Jesus talked so much in parables? I was reading a book this week by a preacher named Tom Ellsworth. And he suggests that talking about the kingdom of heaven is, well, an impossible task. And I think he's got something there. Our words just don't seem to be sufficient when we're trying to talk about the ways of a holy God. And this comes from someone who gets paid to do it for a living. It's relatively impossible for a people of unclean lips to speak of holy things. Now, because we have to talk about what God is doing in our midst, we try. We say things like, following Jesus it's like getting struck by lightning. Or like falling in love. Or like jumping off a high dive. We may not be able to say what it is exactly, but we do our best to get close. We rely on metaphor. We trust God's grace. And most of the time, we can tell people closely enough that they make the connections for themselves. Well, Jesus did the same thing. It sounds strange to us that Jesus would have to do that because, frankly, there's no one who's better equipped to talk about the hidden things of God than God's Son, Jesus Christ. I believe that He spoke to us in parables for at least two good reasons. First, I think He talked in parables because they are a simple way to make profound, complex things apparent. I may not be able to understand the mind of God, but we can understand that the joy that a woman has when she finds the contents of her weekly paycheck underneath her couch. We can understand the relief of a father when he sees his long-lost son walking down the road home. The images that Jesus has used in the parables, they're tangible. They're things that we can begin to wrap our hands and our head around. I think the second reason Jesus uses parables is because he trusts his audience. You have to tell a story, don't you? See, parables are often unfinished until we hear them. They're a sort of mirror that reflect back to us who we are and sometimes who we should be. The endings of these stories are always dropped in our lap like a choose-your-own adventure. These endings often make us ask hard questions about who we are, about the world around us, and the kingdom that God is bringing. Jesus used parables as a playful way to confront people with hard truths, to shock them back to life without smacking them in the face. As a result, parables can often jolt us into action, church, especially if we trust the teller, especially if we're willing to struggle with them and what they really demand of us. Today's parables are about hidden treasure. The first is about a man who is digging in a field and he finds a huge amount of money, a treasure that is not his. And so get this, he buries it again. And then he goes and very willingly sells all that he has so that he can afford to buy that field and the booty that it holds. The truth of the matter is that there were not banks in that day and time. Oftentimes when a raiding party came in, you hurriedly buried your treasure in a field so nobody else could get it. It was the ancient equivalent of basically going to your savings account or going to a safety deposit bank or box at the bank. This story, though, primarily is about the man's response. He is willing to go and make this treasure his own and to invest all that he has to do it. The second story is like it, but different. It's about a merchant. A merchant would have been rich in comparison to the first man, probably. This merchant is looking for fine pearls one day, and he finds the most beautiful one that he had ever laid his eyes on. So he sold all that he owned to be able to afford to buy it for himself. The rich get richer in this story, not by luck, but by skill. By recognizing that the pearl that he's laying his eyes on puts all others that he's ever seen to shame. Church, if the kingdom of God is like hidden treasure, even if it's hidden in plain sight, it may not always be evident to everyone. No, at times it has to be searched for. But when it is found, when we stumble upon it for ourselves, there is only one appropriate response. Joy. Joy. It's like the retired bus driver who takes up the hobby of trying to find rocks. He goes every weekend to flea markets and estate sales looking for beautiful and odd rocks to add to his collection. One day he's looking for strange stones and things that catch his eyes at a flea market, and he sees one that he just has to have. It's kind of ugly, it's dusty, and it obviously needs to be polished up. It's about the size of a walnut. He just frankly likes the way it feels in his hands. It feels heavy. And so he buys it. He goes home and he begins to polish that rock up, and he takes it to a friend of his who's a jeweler. You can imagine his joy when he sees that the stone he bought for $1.50 was a 250 carat ruby. Or maybe it's like the mother of 3, struggling to get by, who's notified of her maiden aunt's death in a distant city. So she uses the last of that month's grocery money on a bus ticket and travels off a long way to settle her aunt's estate. She throws things away in her apartment. She cleans things up so the next tenant can move in. She goes and visits lawyers, everyone's favorite thing to do, to close out her estate. The day she's supposed to leave, she's emptying out an old box. It's full of paper, and she nearly throws this ratty-looking piece of paper away. But she unfolds it and sees that it's a purchase order for stock. Not very well-known company when her aunt bought it, a tech company called Apple. She bought 500 shares at $2 and change a piece. One of those shares is now worth over $400 a piece. Or maybe it's like the librarian, without an adventurous bone in his body, who's at work one day shelving old books. And as he picks a book up off the shelf, it literally falls apart in his hands. He's annoyed. He begins to try to put it back together. He's trying to figure out what he needs to do to make that happen. And then he sees a piece of paper fall to the ground from the ruined binding. As he reaches down and picks it up off the floor and holds it to the light, you're recognizing that he's looking at an ancient map to Shangri-La. These parables, they sound like, well, like the things that legends are made of, don't they? They capture our hearts. They make our pulse quicken. They have the power to make us reconsider all we know through its lens. And friends, that is exactly the effect that it had on Jesus' audience, too. But these stories, they are not about a treasure hunt. They're about the response. They're about finding the elusive kingdom of God, about discovering the truth of the gospel anew. Some of us may be searching for it, like the gentleman looking for the pearl. Some of us may stumble upon it accidentally, like the gentleman who finds the hidden treasure. But these stories are really about our response. About what happens when we find that treasure for ourselves. How do both of these characters respond? They respond by laying everything else down. By selling all that they have. By leveraging all that they will be to make sure that they can make that treasure their own. You remember what I told you earlier in the sermon? That these stories make us question ourselves. Well, maybe the real question for us today, brothers and sisters, is how do we respond to the gospel message? When you and I are given an invitation to a completely different sort of life, do we respond with reckless, irresponsible abandon? Do we respond with joy? Do we respond by investing all we have to gain it for ourselves? Or do we respond a different way altogether? When I was called to the ministry in college, I had other plans. I was pre-med. I think I've told my call experience before, but it was relatively dramatic. Something that I couldn't really argue with because God made it very clear that He wanted me to give my life to the church. A couple of weeks after all this happened, I began to bargain with God. I told Him that I would be glad not to be a doctor, that in fact I could be a psychiatrist. In fact, I kind of added as an afterthought, God, I could be a Christian counselor. Would that be enough? Would that be close enough? I spent 13 years in youth and children's ministry, and frankly, I loved it. But at least a part of me hoped that every step of the way that maybe being an associate minister would be close enough. And satisfy the hound of heaven. When God demanded a foot, I gladly gave an inch. well, gladly might be pushing it. Sometimes it was grudgingly. Now, of course, that I'm doing what God asked me to do more than, 15 years ago. Friends, I have to tell you, the question I most often ask myself is, why did it take me so long to get here? How much did I miss out on? Because my response did not measure up to the people in this parable. Joyful obedience. First revival I ever hosted in church was a blast. It was in Henry County, and everybody was all excited. We invited back an old preacher, and the first night it was just, church was packed. I'll never forget it. It was just awesome. Megan had the job that night of keeping the children while their revival was going on. And I don't know how she got that enviable job, but she did. And she was up there trying to keep a bunch of kids engaged in the midst of the service. She brought some crafts and some things to do with them. The first thing they did was they made cards. And the card was supposed to be a picture and a message to the person in this world that you love the most. And specifically, to tell them what you loved about them. To spell it out and be specific. What you adored about this person. Well, they were on their way out, done with crafts, and going out for the second part, which was to play in the back field of the church. She had brought some kites with her. And they were on their way, and a 5-year-old little blonde boy, who was adorable in that church, his name's Jack. Jack just turned 15. Jack actually got loose from the crowd. He managed to go into the sanctuary as everybody was making their way into the back field. And Jack, right in the middle of our guest preacher's sermon, ran down the middle aisle. Not quiet, not subtle, full speed down the middle aisle. I have to tell you, every single person in that church gave Jack a dirty look that evening. They did. They rolled their eyes and say, man, aren't we just running over with kids? That's aggravating. They're misbehaving. Somebody needs to do something. And Jack goes all the way to the front row. And what we didn't know, of course, is that he was coming to give his card to the person in this world that he loved the most. His mom. And then he proceeded to tell his mother exactly what he adored about her. In great detail, at full volume. Church, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. There was no forgetting about the craft he made as he was playing with the kite out in the back. There was no towing down the side aisle or waiting till later. Jack had found a treasure, and he wanted to give it to his mom. And so he ran. He had to do it now. This is a story about response, church. The passage that has been screaming to me all week comes from Matthew's Gospel. Jesus' words in chapter 6. It says, seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well. When he says first here, he's choosing to talk about something that's primary. Something that's more important than anything else. It's as if he's saying first, before you do anything else, seek my kingdom. What it means is that our life becomes not just about our family, not just about our job, not just about our security. Our life as believers, church, is about seeking the kingdom in all that we do. Make no mistake, these two parables require something more than a lukewarm response. They are begging for our full investment. That we make our life about one thing and one thing alone. Becoming passionate followers of Jesus Christ. So as we prepare to come before God in worship to close this service, I'm going to give you a minute. I want you to take a moment and to examine your life, to examine your heart, to ask yourself the question, are you seeking Him first? Can you pray with me? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we ask that our response in worship would be one of joy today. We ask that you would teach us what it means to seek you first. God, as we sing, enable us to offer you more than our praises. Help us to offer you our lives and all